Redditors who have hired a private investigator, what did you find out? I had a girlfriend that worked for one for a while. She said that the majority of their work was insurance scams. She took a lot of pictures of guys who said they were hurt on the job playing golf and surfing and such. I was a private investigator for a little bit. Most work PIs do is searching financial court records and serving documents. But one time I was paid by wealthy parents to stake out their college senior who had stopped returning their calls. They were worried about her. These parents paid like $40,000 for round-the-clock monitoring just to find out their daughter dropped out of school and was a full-time ski bum. My parents hired a private investigator to find out who my online BF was when I was 13. The PI came back and told us he was just a fat ass 13 yo. ... Hey there, are you subscribed yet? Please do. Also leave a like on this video to help out the channel. My law firm had a bad faith insurance case several years ago. A guy had gotten hurt at work. He claimed he was disabled because he hurt his back, and could not lift anything or really engage in any type of physical activity. His disability insurance carrier failed to handle the claim and pay him what was owed. There was a potential for relatively large damages. In fact, the carrier filed in the court case what is known as an offer to confess judgment. It's a way of agreeing to let judgment be taken for that amount. The plaintiff can accept the offer or reject it. However, if he rejects the offer, he is responsible for the defendant's attorney's fees if the verdict ends up being less than the amount of the offer to confess judgment. The offer in this case was $750,000. Oh, he rejected the offer. A few weeks later our PI found out that the plaintiff bowled every week. The PI got video of the plaintiff bowling and copies of his score sheets going several years back through the date of the accident. It was clear he really was not disabled. He also found that plaintiff had been in a car wreck and was making identical injury claims to the other driver's insurance carrier. We filed a motion with the court to dismiss the lawsuit based upon fraud and perjury. The court set the motion for a hearing, but before that happened the plaintiff dismissed his lawsuit. One of my jobs is to search for long-lost relatives, usually several generations ago. Typically, the case is about old plots of land where I should track down owners, or their heirs to update the land registry because a state wants to build there something. Let me tell you, the amount of information you can find on Google and in public records is astounding if you know where to look. My sister, mid-30s, is adopted and hired one to find her estranged biological father. They came back saying that not only was he still alive and nearby, but he had a daughter. Meaning she also had a biological sibling. Further digging from the PI uncovered that they weren't just similar ages either, they were exactly the same age. The evidence suggested that my sister had a twin and her birth father had taken the twin and vanished. Huge, life-changing news. Eventually, through more incredible detective work, the PI realized that the daughter was actually just my sister. There was no other sibling and they had just been investigating my sister the whole time accidentally. Needless to say, we asked for the money back. TLDR, sister hired a private investigator accidentally investigated sister. Not me, but my grandfather did. He was separated from his brother when the Japanese occupied China. My grandfather safely made it to Hong Kong and eventually to Canada. His brother made it to Singapore or Malaysia according to family friends back then. So my grandfather spent a good 5 years or so working with a PI to find his brother so they can be reunited. Sadly, with just a picture and the fact many people died in the war, it wasn't much to go on. My grandfather is still alive and always thinks of his brother. It's his wish to see him one more time. Had a babysitter we thought was stealing from us. Luckily our neighbor was a PI couple and they ran a background check for $10. Babysitter had a string of dues and a few days before a large fine was due, my camera disappeared. He also stole money from my kids' piggy banks. He sort of disappeared but was also really into Instagram, so I surreptitiously followed him. He started babysitting again for a single mom, easy target, and posted a lot of fun pics with this family. I tracked down the mom and sent her a long email detailing out his whole scam. She said we were right and it was clear he'd been stealing from her business. He has since gone underground, but I still Google him regularly to see what he's up to. He's been able to avoid arrests for a while now. Hadn't heard from my mom since I was about 15, very unstable due to drugs and alcohol, etc. When I was 29 I decided it was time to find out what happened to her. I figured if she was a Jane Doe somewhere then I could put her to rest, and if she was alive then I wanted to let her know that I forgave her. Hired a PI to help. I guess she was moved by my story and so she also ran info for the man my mother was apparently married to on the house. And with one clue from his report I was able to track them down. I wouldn't have found my mom alive and was just starting out on recovery after being homeless and addicted for many years if it wasn't for the PI who kindly ran an extra report for free. Mom has remained sober now for about 7 years and is probably the healthiest she's ever been, physically and emotionally. I'm glad you are enjoying this video. Before we continue, don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment. My grandmother's first boyfriend, after my grandfather died, said he was a retired cop and a veteran. They enjoyed dancing to country music together, and bought a new car, in her name though, even though she can't drive anymore. My uncles hired a pie. Turns out, that old bastard had a habit of shacking up with widows and bleeding them dry. The boyfriend, not the pie. My mother's dad walked out on Mom, my aunt, and my grandmother when Mom was just 5. A few years later, my grandmother died of a grand mal seizure. Mom was taken in by her grandparents, but she always wondered why her dad left and what became of him. In her 40s, she saved up a bit and hired a pie to track him down. Turns out he moved over time from Pittsburgh to California, where he wound up in prison for armed robbery and other violent crimes. He died in San Quentin Penitentiary. I think Mom got a lot of closure out of that. She was able to see that life would have most likely been even worse had he stayed. At least living with her grandparents, she was loved and raised to fulfill her potential. I know somebody who was like an assistant to the actual pie. She basically went to bingo with a camera in her purse to capture video of a woman. The woman claimed that a car accident had completely immobilized her. But she would take off the neck brace all the time, playing bingo hours on end. Nothing exciting, just capturing fraud. I used to work for an insurance defense firm years ago. Best pie story I have is where we hired one to tail a guy who was suing our client for an injury that wasn't entirely our client's fault. The guy was refusing to settle, and was insisting on going to trial even though we offered a fair sum that would have paid his medical bills. The pie we hired got some good pics that showed the plaintiff was nowhere near as injured as he claimed, but the crown jewel of the photos was one where the guy was walking on a pier with a woman who wasn't his wife. Had his hand on her ass and everything. Later in a deposition, the attorney slid the picture to the plaintiff and said something like, "Mr. Smith, obviously not his real name, who is the woman in this picture. We would like to schedule a deposition with her as well." The guy went ghost white and told his attorney he wanted to settle. At least he was smart enough to realize that if his wife found out the other woman was gonna be deposed, he was gonna have to get a family law attorney as well, because the divorce papers would soon follow. Even in 2020, I struggle to picture a private investigator as anything but a man in a beige trenchcoat and a trilby. When I met my wife, she seemed to have a normal modern family. 2 moms, 2 dads. Over time it became apparent her stepdad wasn't around much. Holidays, birthdays, you name it, he'd pop in to say hi, grab a nap, whatever, then take off again. My wife's family thought this was normal, just the way it had always been since they were teenagers. He claimed to have a job following FedEx trucks around the state to prevent theft and drug trafficking. But I thought it strange and started making jokes about him having another family. Well, I guess it got my sister-in-law thinking because she gets a favor from the pie at her law firm. Sure enough, he has not 2 but 3 wives around the state, and 5 other stepchildren between them. My sister-in-law breaks the news to her mother, who immediately changes the locks and files for divorce. They never speak again. Cold turkey. Divorce is even uncontested. As a foo, they also send the report to his other wives. On the other end of the pie spectrum, I was in a bad car accident 13 years ago. I was rear-ended at a red light by a lady going 45. Most of my injuries were soft tissue damage minus the TMJ. Fast forward 8 years. Finally had my court day to see if I'd get $90,000 in damages. They show camera footage from 4 years prior covering 3 whopping days of me pushing a grocery cart, carrying groceries and talking on the phone. Apparently that's enough to determine that you're fine. Present day, every morning my hands go numb, it takes 3 days to clean 1 room. I can't braid my hair. Various other numerous tasks that take me way longer than any other normal 41-year-old. Sometimes you have to do things because you still want to feel normal. Not like you're a 90-year-old woman. My wife and I are friends with a lot of bar owners and bartenders because of her job. We knew this one owner tender, we will call him Dana, that was the nicest ducking guy. Like, if he knew you were sick, he would cover your shift at your bar and then give you the tips he made that night. Just the best guy. Then one night we are drinking with another bartender friend, Ben. Ben lets us know that Dana has brain cancer. He's been keeping it quiet, but Ben has been giving him money, upwards of $5,000, for treatment. My wife and I were about to give money to Ben to pass on. Then Dana's business partner got suspicious and hired a pie to follow Dana on a day he took off for medical reasons. Turned out Dana spent the day drinking at another bar. No doctor visits. The business partner confront Dana, who comes clean. He did not have cancer. He was just saying that to get money from his friends. Apparently lots of bartenders had been giving him money. Dana is more or less run out of town. He moved to a different city, and I know he slowly paid Ben back, but it took a couple years. I'm not sure what happens to him since.